wings, as they say.
Right.
Okay, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. We're talking to Stanton Friedman and Kathleen Mardon about their new book, Science Was Wrong. And don't forget, you can get a copy of their other book, Captured the Betty and Barney Hill Story, by going to their webpage. But we'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages. And now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the show. So I think at this point in time, I'm going to announce the winner of last week's Mind Yoga question. Last week, the question was, this ghost hunting device scans AM and FM frequencies in a continuous fashion, creating white noise, which people believe spirits can use to communicate with. This box is said to be interactive because you can ask questions directly to the spirits and receive replies from them as you're talking. So the correct answer is the Frank's box. Now, there were a number of people who put the spirit box, which is kind of another name, but the technical name is the Frank box. And so the winner of my book, Dark Angels, An Insider's Guide to Ghost Spirits and Attached Entities, was Suzanne Martin from Arizona. So congratulations, Susan, and your book will be in the mail currently. And so later on in the show, we're going to do this week's Mind Yoga question. And what's our topic today? Oh, we're going to be doing an alien abduction question in honor of our guests. Okay, so Stan, Kathleen, let's get back to business. So before the break, I mentioned if man could fly, he would have wings. And back in the day, that was pretty much what people believed.
Well, it was a strange thing. There were people who were familiar with the story of, Daedalus and Icarus. Just put wings on a body and leap off a mountain, and you'd be able to fly. Didn't work out very well, I'm afraid. And there were, back in the 1700s, the first people to fly that we know about, Montgolfier's had a balloon that had a basket. It wasn't a powered balloon, of course. And they flew several people up. And there were times when people, the Chinese, had people, like from a kite, a big kite, and they'd fly along with somebody hanging onto a rope kind of thing. But there was talk in the late 19th century about flight. A lot of people were looking at it, and, progress was being made in a lot of different areas of technology. I mean, after all, now we had steamboats, which were thought to be foolishly inappropriate for man. Couldn't go fast anyway because you wouldn't be able to breathe if you went faster than 30 miles an hour. Everybody knows that. But there was serious effort going on in the late 1900s. And the Wright brothers were dissatisfied with what they found when they looked at the literature, and they started running their own tests. They were bicycle mechanics without a lot of education, but they were careful in what they did. They ran a lot of experiments, and they found that what they measured didn't match what the theories said they should be measuring. So they ran a lot of wind. They built a wind tunnel, actually, and ran a lot more tests. And they were quietly making progress. And one of the biggest names, well, he was the biggest American astronomer of the 19th century, a man named Simon Newcomb. Born here in Canada, I might add. I don't know whether I should be proud of that or not. I'm a dual citizen. I complain about both governments. But Simon was often asked his opinion on subjects of importance, and one of them was aviation. And he said, all the evidence shows man will never fly except perhaps with a balloon. He made a strong statement about that. Would you believe 2 months before the Wright brothers' first flight, And when I say he was an important astronomer, his funeral a few years later was actually attended by the President of the United States. I mean, he was a wheel, but he was opposed. And the First World War brought aviation more into the picture, and I get a kick out of the fact in 1908, the Wright brothers finally got a government grant. They'd applied and been turned down. And they got a bonus of $5,000 for making an airplane that would go 47 miles an hour. And they got the bonus because what they had to meet was 40 miles an hour. I mean, that tells you where aviation was at. And the first Wright brothers flight, the whole flight and the airplane would fit inside a 747, believe it or not. And because there had been so much laughter when a guy named Langley, who was a good scientist, had tried to fly, he had a powered craft all right, and he tried to use a ramp on the Potomac River, and go down the ramp and supposedly take off, and it crashed in the water, and it was called Langley's Folly. And so the Wright brothers were not going to stick their necks out in public. Kitty Hawk was covered by 3 newspapers in the entire United States because, talk about flying is pretty silly stuff. Anyway, the First World War came along, and most of the planes used were overseas manufactured. And as an example of the resistance, even though planes were being shot down during the war and they had shown their worth, after the war, Billy Mitchell, who had fought, he was a pilot during the war, First World War, in Europe, and he was making a lot of statements about the need for getting more active with aviation because it was going to change everything about warfare. Ships would be sunk by airplanes dropping bombs on them. And boy, did that get laughter from the Secretary of the Navy who volunteered, I'd stand right on any ship that you're going to bomb from the air. And he was actually court-martialed for insubordination in the mid-20s. And, it's an illustration of actions have consequences. On November 29th, 1941, there was an Army-Navy football game. That was a major rivalry back then, still is, I guess. And there was a picture of the USS Arizona with a statement, nobody has ever sunk a battleship from the air. It's like the Navy is blowing its own horn, 8 days later, Pearl Harbor occurred. The USS Arizona was sunk by bombs dropped from the air. 1,100 people died as a result. They weren't worried about bombers coming from the air because it was impossible. Science was wrong. And there were consequences. The same thing happened, just another example from aviation. An English inventor, Frank Whittle, had developed and got a patent on a jet engine. Everything was propellers before that, even Lindbergh and all that. And the world was excited about airplanes. Lindbergh, over 100,000 people were waiting for him in France when he arrived from New York and won the $25,000 prize for being the first to fly across the ocean on his own in a powered aircraft. It only took 33 and a half hours, you'll understand. Anyway, that sparked interest in aviation, and Whittle got a patent for a jet engine, but everybody knew jet engines would be much too heavy for airplanes. So they did nothing. The Germans, on the other hand, German von Ohain got a patent in 1936. But the Germans built jet engine-powered airplanes that were used before the end of the war. The English didn't. Just think of how the Battle of Britain might have gone if there had been jet-powered fighters on the British side of the line. Again, there were consequences of this resistance to new ideas on the part of smart people. So that gives you some flavor. Oh, the business about traveling faster than the speed of sound. Everybody knew there was a sonic barrier. As you got closer and closer to the speed of sound, a little over 700 miles at sea level, the airplane would shake itself to pieces and wouldn't be able to go the other side. That was the absolute limit. Well, it wasn't, as it happens. And when Yeager did it in 1947,